Hello, we are Team 4. This is the index of our presentation. Our research is extension of the paper Lipstick on a Pig. We conducted a series of experiments to explore gender bias in birth and several debiased models. We successfully discovered residing gender biases in those models. Let's see our work step by step. As we know, Rangi's models contain social biases. It is because Rangi's models train corpus that reflects human bias. In our research, we will mainly handle gender bias. Before birth, there were numerous worries about bias involved embedding. Debiasing methods were proposed and bias evaluation metric-related papers followed. However, those methods didn't resolve all the problems. The original paper, Lipstick on a Pig, demonstrated and proved it through several experiments. The main purpose of experiments was visualizing the world and showing they clustered even after applying the biasing methods. The paper pointed out these methods are superficial, but we don't use world-level embeddings anymore. After the appearance of bird and animal, the language models are now considering contextual factors for understanding corpus. Of course, they do have gender biases, and many approaches to mitigate them were published. Our curiosity started from here. How the contextual models behave under the same experiments proposed in the Lipstick paper. We found a paper that worked on animal, and it shows the clustering of gender biased words in animal, but it only showed animal itself, but not the biased models. In our research, we will focus on bird, and further we will compare with the biased models. To clarify, research questions that are as follows. How much gender bias do contextualized bird embeddings contain? Did proposed debiased bird models really resolve gender biases? To answer to our research questions, we divided our main job into two parts. The first one is changing from word to contextual embedding, and second one is applying debiased methods for contextual language models. To utilize the contextualized embedding in bird, some process is needed. We obtained the embeddings with multiple sentence templates and computed the average to use it as a single embedding. Our research question was to tackle the effectiveness of debiasing methods in the contextualized embeddings. For that, we used cosine similarity with templates, not only extending the Lipstick on a Pig paper. This concept follows the recent widely used metric for gender bias evaluation in sentence encoders. The second is applying new debiasing methods for bird at a contextual level. In our research, we tested 3 debiased models. The first sentence debias is evaluating gender subspace and subtracting the gender words to make it neutral. Second one is fine-tuning the bird layers with sum of 2 losses, gender bias degree and semantic difference. The last one is fine-tuning the bird with data augmentation with swapping gender words, technique called CDS. Based on the works I mentioned, we conduct the experiments we've seen in the Lipstick on a Pig. With the result of experiments, we will analyze them to answer our research questions.
Data and experiments. To resolve our research question, 3 experiments in Lipstick on a Pig paper were conducted on contextualized embedding level. I'd like to briefly recap all those experiments. First, the paper selected top 500 male and female biased words by doing projection on He-Man shape vector, and showed they can be clustered even after debiasing. Next, on the proficiency experiment, they showed male and female biased words have more of those gender biased neighbor words, regardless of debiasing. And in classification experiment, gender biased words were trained by SVM, and high accuracy to distinguish them on debiased word embeddings was obtained. Next is a methodology to calculate gender bias based on contextualized embeddings. We extracted nouns from vocabulary to make them addressable to templates. After generating 11 sentences per noun word, they were passed to the bird encoder, and average contextualized embedding was computed. Also, each 80 male and female sentences were used for calculating gender directional factors. Here are our experimental details. Word2Vec and globe were used for getting noun words, and for getting encoding from the bird hidden layers, we used the last 4 hidden layers that have shown the highest F1 score of reflecting contextual information. Also, in the point that BERT uses subword tokenization and possibly divides a single word to multiple tokens, subword pooling using first and last token of corresponding subwords was applied according to this paper. Methods for devising model that we applied are as follows. For send device and context device, we use publicly released computed models by others. To get the CDS applied model, fine-tuning was applied on the CDS applied gap coreference dataset.
Now let's look at the results, which I know many of you have waited for. Here, we will quickly recap replication results and move on to the baseline of biases in BERT embeddings. Then we will examine how recent debiasing models perform. Replication results. For those of you who do not remember, the author used word embeddings from hard debiased and GN Glove to suggest that debiasing methods used in both paper are not really effective, but only cover up biases. The 3 experiments on the slide shows that after debiasing, words still cluster, correlates, and are classified. The slide could seem a little bit compact, but it's a simple aggregation of what we have been talking about whole semester. I hope this broader view for the following series of experiments will help you gain insights from the results. Moving on to the BERT baseline. Here, just like the replication results, contextualized BERT embeddings clusters by gender. For proficiency experiment, we can observe that neighbors are male-oriented, more male neighbors. And lastly, SVM classifier distinguish those embeddings with great accuracy. Now, we can confidently answer to our RQ1 that contextualized BERT embeddings apparently contain gender biases, quantified by figures and scores. As you see in the speech bubble, let's apply these experiments to debiased BERT models. We have tried 3 different models. The paper we use are written below, and we will refer to each as send debiased, context debiased, and BERT CDS. First, clustering. A is the figure we have looked in BERT baseline, and B shows the clustering for 3 debiased models in order. Figures on the left column are embeddings extracted from sentences using vocabularies in Word2Vec, and right column are from Glove. At a glance, we can tell the embeddings still cluster in debiased models. Although they are kind of more mixed after debiasing methods are applied, evident gathering of embeddings can be seen in all 6 figures. In the meanwhile, you might find the low scores in the table surprising, located at the left side of the screen. The numbers marked with asterisks are those, and this happens because k-means clustering sometimes capture the wrong cluster. For instance, refer to the bottom right BERT CDS figure, where male and female embeddings split entire map into left and right. However, k-means clustering with only 2 clusters split the map into top and bottom here. Such examples yield low score inaccuracy, even though a clear division between male and female embeddings can be seen. Second, professions. We discovered a very interesting result. Most embeddings were male-oriented in BERT, and it was not debiased in send debiased too. However, we could observe female orientation for context debiased and BERT CDS embeddings. If we recall the methodology of 3 debiased BERT models briefly, send debiased only removes the projection to the gender bias direction. However, context debiased calculates 2 types of losses, and BERT CDS uses variable switching. Then both models initiate training in the opposite direction, emphasizing female in the embeddings. Therefore, we believe a more careful approach in debiasing methods should be taken to prevent reverse bias learned leaning towards female. Just to add before we move on, inconsistent trend in Pearson correlations will be further analyzed in discussion session. Lastly, SVM classifier is applied to all models and all presented very high accuracies. At the same time, we could spot that debiasing has taken place with underlying accuracy decrease compared to the BERT baseline numbers 99.4% and 99.9%. For your ease of reference, all data are gathered in the table below. To sum up, let's go back to our RQ2. Did proposed debiased BERT models really resolve gender biases? To answer to the question, no, they didn't. All debiased model embeddings had clear clusterings. Profession embeddings were either shifted more to male or female side. Also, classification accuracy numbers demonstrated it can learn features from the embeddings to distinguish whether it is male or female biased. In conclusion, we again found lipstick on a pig on debiased models too.
In discussions, we will first talk about enhancing K-means algorithm in clustering and validity of Pearson correlation in our test. Earlier in the results, we have mentioned that K-means clustering sometimes captures the wrong cluster. Simply thinking, not all male bias embeddings will be located on one corner on the entire vector space. If those are spread in different parts of the vector space, simple K-means algorithm with only two clusters will not capture the entire picture. However, the shape of the distribution varies across different models. Numbers of clusters required can be different, and an algorithm that can group similar clusters into one will also be necessary. We believe that this could be a huge enhancement point to calculate the right accuracy for clustering experiment. Then this will lead to more precise analysis within the debiasing model as well. In the original paper, the number of male neighbors in the Y and the bias level in x-axis showed a clear correlation in a baseline experiment and utilized in profession experiment. However, in our contextualized environment, no clear correlation between x and y values could be obtained. Thus, comparison between the correlation value before and after debiasing in our experiment seems meaningless. Therefore, in professions experiments, we only retrieve information that embeddings are either male and female oriented. At the end of this interesting project, we suggest following future works. To consider contextualized embeddings, we use gender predefined templates for constructing sentences. And for simplification, noun words were extracted. However, in the real world, other types of words really matter. Also, to get more contextualized information, just using predefined templates and taking average on them is not enough. We can think of an approach like generating templates for real-world corpora. Next, it will be meaningful to analyze the presence of strong bias on gender vectors. Following the paper from our related work, principal components were computed from gender vectors and random words. In their experiment, the first eigenvalue of gender vectors are significantly large, which denotes a single direction. Lastly, we found an interesting point compared with paper in related work. Though they used a different language model from us, Elmo, their clustering and classification accuracy was much lower than ours. Also, their thesis presents contextualized embeddings tend to mitigate gender bias. It was quite different from ours as well. Exploration towards analyzing which language model and experimental settings or data make the change will be very interesting. Here are our references. And thank you for the listening. Have a good day.